Years ago, there was a musician, a rapper, who grew up in a Christian home, but he walked away from God for a while. He ended up becoming a very popular musician. He had a couple of hits around the year 1990. You Can't Touch This. We've Got to Pray Just to Make It Today. And he was extremely successful. But as the years went by, his songs got a little bit raunchier, a little bit more worldly. And one day he was making a video of himself with a whole bunch of scantily clad ladies by a swimming pool. And while he was making that video for his next big hit, he felt like God was saying to him, "What are you doing here? Why are you here? Why aren't you serving me?" And he was under major conviction. He finished what he was doing, but after that, he turned back to the Lord. And then MC Hammer went and got ordained, and now he's serving God today as a minister. He came back to God. But at first, he had to answer the question, what am I doing here? Why am I hanging out in this worldly situation when I was created to serve God in a spiritual situation? That's the question that we sometimes have to wrestle with. If we really love Jesus, if we really love God, what are we doing over here being involved with this sin? What are we doing over here acting hypocritical? What are we doing over here separating ourselves from the one person who knows us best and loves us most? And that's the question David has to answer as we look at 1 Samuel chapter 29. David is marching with the Philistines. He's been hanging out with them for a year and a half, pretending to be with them. He's a double agent. He's got one foot in the camp of God and one foot in the camp of the Philistines. Chapter 29, the Philistines gathered all their forces at Aphek, and Israel camped by the spring in Jezreel. They're about to go to war against Israel, and David is with the enemy. Verse 2, as the Philistine rulers marched with their units of hundreds and thousands, David and his men were marching at the rear with Achish. The commanders of the Philistines said, well, what about these Hebrews? What are they doing here? Achish replied, well, isn't this David, who was an officer of Saul, king of Israel? He's already been with me for over a year, and from the day he left Saul until now, I have found no fault in him. Well, we've already seen that there are faults in David. God knows there are faults in David. But Achish doesn't see those things. He's blind to the fact that David's been lying to him this whole time, hiding out with him, when in reality, whenever he's not looking, he's killing the enemies of Israel. He's not helping the Philistines any. And Achish hasn't found any fault with him because he hasn't seen any fault with him, not because there isn't any. Verse 4, the Philistine commanders, they're a little bit more suspicious than Achish is. They're angry with Achish and said, send the man back that he may return to the place you assigned him. He must not go with us into battle, or he will turn against us during the fighting. They don't trust him, and they're probably right not to trust him. I don't even know if David can trust himself right now. How much better could he do at regaining his master's favor than by taking the heads of our own men? Verse 5, isn't this the David they sang about in their dances? Saul has slain his thousands and David his tens of thousands. Well, that was 11 chapters ago? That was back in chapter 18. But the Philistines knew the songs and they had not forgotten them. They were suspicious of David, wary of David, a little fearful of David. They didn't trust David. He doesn't belong with us. And how sad is it that a Christian, a believer in God, could live such a compromised life that it takes somebody who doesn't know the Lord to out you as somebody who doesn't belong there. I mean, that's how far David has gotten away from God and from his true calling. Verse 6, so Achish called David and said to him, as surely as the Lord lives, he's even using the Hebrew covenant name for God, Yahweh, as surely as the Lord lives, you have been reliable, and I would be pleased to have you serve with me in the army. From the day you came to me until today, I have found no fault in you. That's because I'm blind as a bat, but we aren't telling anybody. But the rulers don't approve of you. Now turn back and go in peace. Do nothing to displease the Philistine rulers. David, he's carrying on the charade even further in verse 8. But what have I done? What have you found against your servant from the day I came to you until now? Why can't I go and fight against the enemies of my Lord the king? And that could have a double meaning. The enemies of my Lord the king might be the Philistines. So David is speaking metaphorically and allegorically, and it can be interpreted either way. And I don't even know for sure if David has a plan in his head, because he's where he's not supposed to be. Verse 9, Achish answered, I know you've been as pleasing in my eyes as an angel of God. Nevertheless, the Philistine commanders have said, you must not go up with us into battle. Now get up early along with your master's servants who have come with you, and leave in the morning as soon as it is light. Verse 11, so David and his men got up early in the morning to go back to the land of the Philistines, and the Philistines went up to Jezreel. And what's interesting about this is that when David does get back to Ziklag, which was given to him by Achish, king of Gath, of the Philistines, something terrible will have happened. And if David had been with his people the whole time, if he had not carried on this charade of being with the Philistines, this terrible thing that's going to happen in chapter 30 would not have happened. Sometimes we think we're so sure of ourselves that we should go over here, that we are not over here when we could have made a difference with our own people. And so I think one of the things we need to ask ourselves sometimes is, God, am I where I'm supposed to be with you? Is there any sin in my life I need to confess to you? Is there anything I'm not doing that I should be doing? Because so often people who aren't obeying the Lord's will as already revealed, they want information about things that they don't know about yet. And God's like, well, first you need to be obedient with what you already are supposed to be doing. It's sort of like somebody who's not doing a good job at work saying, when am I going to get a better job? Well, you might get a better job once you start doing a good job at the one you got. Be glad you still have a job. And so God help us to be faithful and to be the best we can be for God and for Christ where we're at. I'm living in Potter, Wisconsin. I'm blessed to be pastor of a church. God help me to be the best pastor I can be. About to celebrate my 25th anniversary with my sweetie. God help me to be the best husband that I can be. God help me to be faithful where I am with who I'm with all my life. That's the most important thing. And if there's anything else that's icing on the cake, if God wanted us to do something supernatural and mighty and write a book or that type of thing, that's extra. Most thing that I'm concerned about is being the best I can be for God where God has called me to be. And I think that's something that we should all strive for. Not that we can't have goals, not that we can't have a desire to be at a certain place, but help us, God, to be faithful where we're at on the way to where you're going to have us be. Jesus loves you. This I know, for the Bible tells me so. You guys have a great day. We'll be back tomorrow for 1 Samuel 30. And I saw that as I was going on the air, it looked like Lily was doing a video, and it looked like to me that she was going to reduplicate yesterday's children's sermon from church. I'm all excited. I got to see that. Maybe you can tune into that too on Facebook. You guys have a great day.